What you are interested in is the moon, how the programs were
Yeah.
created, what started first, and it was.
Yeah.
You see, there's also, if you're interested, I could tell you because I know more
Yeah. Yeah.
now.
Please. Yeah. Please. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
the Germans, they were developing the Honeyboo and the
Yeah.
other craft, but they didn't
Yeah.
really land first on the moon and built the base. It was
Yeah.
actually the US Army who got there first
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
1950s. It wasn't the Germans that
Wow.
got there in the 1930s.
Yeah.
They could land on the moon and they could mine stuff on the moon because they needed
Mm-hmm.
resources. But they weren't the first to build a base on the moon. That was the US
Mm-hmm.
Navy, actually, and
I
the
see.
military and the Army in the
Okay.
1950s by getting Werner von Braun and those scientists from Paperclip.
I see.
That's
I
why
see.
they arranged Paperclip, because they did know that the Germans were working on UFO technology. So they
Yeah.
had to catch up and they wanted a base first on the moon underground. So that's why they got Werner von Braun. They negotiated a trade deal. You give us what we want and we won't tell the world what you're manufacturing, that you
Yeah.
have
Yeah. Yeah.
UFO tech. So that was the deal, actually. It wasn't Germany that threatened the US, it was the US that threatened Germany. And the US, in order to remove the threat of the US, the Germans went and built a base in Antarctica
I
under
see.
the ice. So they actually built the base, but not on the moon. They
But
built it.
German,
Yeah.
but Germany, the Germany guys actually did, send the UFOs
Yes, they
floating in the
did.
White
Yeah.
House, right?
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
what they
yeah,
did,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, that was the
Eisenhower,
counter
that
threat.
is real. Okay, okay.
Yeah, that's real.
1950,
Oh, that's real.
yeah, that's
The,
real. Okay, okay.
the only thing that's
Okay.
not accurate on the timeline is lunar space operations or lunar command something. He was saying that that was a German base that the
Yeah, yeah,
US
yeah.
took over.
Swastika.
Yeah, that's
Swastika
not a
thing.
swastika. Never was a swastika.
Yeah,
It's a
that's
huge,
ancient.
yeah, it's a
Huge. Yeah,
huge domed facility with connectors and
yeah.
more domes. 42, about
There's a
32 levels.
there is a there's a video. There's a huge, gigantic ship, and James Rink did an
Mhm.
interview on the someone who retired from the Navy, and he is the scientist on that one. They retrieved the third eye um, extraterrestrials, the
Yeah.
female Lisa. All right, they retrieved the Lisa, and but that's not my point. My question is, there were some few seconds they shoot the movie about alien tower in a abandoned city, like a structure. Is that real?
Yes,
Because
there's
they're
alien, yeah,
bodies.
there's alien structures and all kinds of crash things on the moon.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and there's,
like a city, but
yes,
nobody
yeah.
was there. Yeah.
No, it's abandoned. That's abandoned. There's a
I
lot
see.
of artifacts on the moon, like ships, arc
Oh, that's
ships,
crazy. Yeah,
glass cities that exploded.
yeah,
There's a lot of stuff on the moon that's
yeah.
accurate. So there's a lot of stuff on Mars, a lot of pyramids, because the Anunnakis and the Meldakians had lived on Mars.
There were two moons, right? Because in ancient China, they saw two moons, and they say one failed. They
There
were
could have
supposed
been. I mean,
could be right. Yeah,
yeah, it's hard, the history. There's so much different history. It's like sorting this out
because
is crazy.
in your book, you are saying 700,000 years ago, the moon has been pushed into the orbit, right?
Yeah,
And Pleiadians and who is that? Pleiadians and the other one,
yeah,
they just followed the moon, right?
yeah.
They spent years.
Well,
Yeah,
another history says that the moon has always been here, that it was created with
yeah,
Earth
yeah. Yeah.
4.6 billion years ago. So honestly, there could have been two moons. That history is so dense and thick.
Yeah,
It's so hard. There could have
it's
been
so
two
hard to,
moons.
yeah,
And it's hard to pinpoint when Tiamat exploded and when Maldak
yeah.
exploded. That's not the same planet. People saying that Maldak and Tiamat is the same planet, but it's not.
Oh, really?
It's two
It's
separate
not.
planets. No, it's two separate planets.
Wow. I thought it's the same, you know?
It's not the same. It's not the same at
Yeah.
all. It's two
Okay.
separate planets that exploded at two
Okay.
separate times in history. This is what I'm trying to find out, because too many people say different times for when these different planets exploded. I'm like, what?
I see.
So you were never SSP, although you're curious
Yep.
about how the SSP was created and what happened where first in history. And the US 1980s, they built, US Navy went to the moon. In 1950s, did their first space underground. In the 1980s went to Mars and built bases. So
Oh,
Planetary Corp, that's US, with a bunch of other countries working with them now on these bases and in underground research facilities. But you see, history, it's interesting how people experience history and how they tell their version of what they were programmed to say. It was the Germans on the moon. The Germans got Antarctica, the US Navy and Army got the moon and Mars.